Some men learn about their wives' affairs by accident. A text message. A strange charge on the credit card. Me? I figured it out because I make a living spotting lies. It started with little things. Hazel had always been sharp, efficient, she ran on schedules, everything in its place. But suddenly there were gaps. Late meetings. A business trip she never used to take. A perfume I didn't recognize. Most men might have brushed it off, trusted their wife. I wasn't most men. I've been a private investigator for over 20 years, built my business from the ground up. Before that, I did a little of everything: construction, trucking, security, whatever paid. I grew up in foster care, learned young that nobody's coming to save you. You watch, you listen, and you get ahead by knowing what others don't. I didn't say a word to Hazel, just watched. A quiet man makes people talk, and in my line of work you learn that people are careless. They slip up. They get comfortable. And she did. The first real clue came on a Tuesday. Hazel always left at 7:30 like clockwork. That morning I watched her pull out of the driveway and turn left. Her office was to the right. I followed. She wasn't sloppy, I'll give her that. No obvious meeting spots, no motels, no cheap cliches. Instead, she parked outside a coffee shop near Vanderbilt, sat in her car for exactly 3 minutes, then walked in. 10 minutes later, Nolan Ferguson followed. Tall, polished, the kind of man who shook hands like he was sealing a deal. I'd met him once at a corporate event, some VP at her firm. He had the look of a guy who believed his own hype. I sat across the street, watching through the window. They leaned in when they talked. Hazel smiled, touched his wrist, a little too familiar for colleagues. He reached over, brushed something off her sleeve, an excuse to touch her. Subtle. Calculated. I took photos. A guy in my business doesn't jump to conclusions. Could be a coincidence. Could be nothing. But I already knew it wasn't. That night, Hazel came home like nothing had changed. Kissed my cheek, asked about my day like she wasn't sneaking around. I played along, nodded when she talked about work, let her spin her lies. The thing about cheaters? They don't stop to think that the person they're lying to might already know. I let it go for another week, gathering evidence. A lunch here. A hotel reservation there. Receipts she didn't realize were emailed to our shared account. I could have confronted her then, but I wasn't interested in a screaming match or a sob story. No, if she wanted to sneak around like a professional, I'd make sure she got caught like one. The turning point came on a Saturday. She was in the shower when her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Nolan Ferguson. Nolan, thinking about Thursday. Can't stop smiling. I didn't touch the phone. Didn't need to. I had everything I needed. At breakfast, she sat across from me, flipping through her tablet like she hadn't spent the night with another man 3 days ago. You're quiet this morning, she said, not looking up. Just thinking. I sipped my coffee. About? I met her eyes, held them just long enough to watch the flicker of unease. Work. She nodded, but something in her shifted. She was starting to wonder. Good. By the time she left for her weekend strategy session, I had a plan. She thought she was in control, thought she had options. She didn't. Because I wasn't going to just catch her. I was going to ruin her. Hazel left at 10:15, right on schedule. Black blazer, leather bag slung over her shoulder, the picture of a woman who had somewhere important to be. She gave me a quick smile before walking out like she wasn't screwing another man behind my back. I sipped my coffee, watched through the kitchen window as she pulled out of the driveway. She turned left again. I already knew where she was going. I didn't need to follow her this time. Instead, I went to work. My office wasn't much, just a rented space above an auto shop off Nolansville Pike. Sturdy desk, steel filing cabinets, a coffee maker older than some of my clients. But it got the job done. I pulled up my laptop and went through the files. Photos. Timestamps. GPS logs from the tracker I slipped under her car last week. I wasn't guessing anymore, I had proof. At 11:30, I made a call. Hey, Mike. Mike Whitaker ran one of the biggest podcasts in Tennessee, The Unfiltered Truth. A guy with a voice like a diesel engine and a nose for scandal. His show specialized in real stories, the kind that made people lean in. He also happened to be an old friend. Finley, he said. To what do I owe the pleasure? I got something for you. Cheating scandal, corporate execs, hotel rooms. The kind of thing your listeners eat up. Mike chuckled. You don't usually bring me this kind of thing. What's the catch? No catch, I said. Just a good story. Names, dates, proof. You'll have everything you need. A pause. Then must be personal. I didn't answer. He didn't press. Send it over, he said. By the time I hung up, the wheels were already turning. I wasn't just going to expose Hazel. I was going to make sure she couldn't talk her way out of it. That night, she came home late. Dinner's in the fridge, I said from the couch, not looking up from the game. She set her bag down carefully, smoothed her skirt. Long day. I bet. She hesitated like she wanted to say something else, but instead she just nodded. I'm gonna shower. I watched her go. The thing about people who lie for a living? They assume they're the smartest person in the room. But Hazel had made a mistake. She was lying to a man who did this for a living. 2 days later, Mike's episode aired. It wasn't subtle. Power, lies, and hotel rooms, the secret life of a corporate VP. He didn't name names, but he didn't have to. The details were specific enough that anyone who knew Hazel or Nolan would put it together. He laid it all out, an executive in a high-profile firm carrying on a long-term affair with a colleague, complete with timestamps, witness accounts, and hard evidence. The internet did the rest. I stayed off my phone that day, went about my business like nothing was happening. The real fireworks started when Hazel got home. She walked in fast, her face set, phone in her hand. What did you do? I took my time setting my beer down. Something wrong. She stepped forward, shoving her phone toward me. Don't play games, Finley. You gave them everything. Do you know how this makes me look? I leaned back in my chair. Yeah, I said. I do. Her hands curled into fists. You had no right. I laughed, shaking my head. No right? You've been sneaking around for months, lying to my face, and you think I don't have a right? She looked away, jaw tight. It was complicated. No, it wasn't. You made a choice. I just made sure you got credit for it. Silence. Her phone buzzed in her hand. Another message. Another piece of the life she thought she could keep hidden cracking apart. Finally, she looked at me. You wanted to humiliate me. I didn't answer right away. I let her sit with it. Then I said I wanted you to face consequences. She swallowed, blinking fast. You think this makes you look strong? No, I said, standing. I think it makes me look like a man who won't be played. I grabbed my keys, walked past her without another word. Outside, the air was cool, the street quiet. I took a deep breath. It felt good. I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Hazel didn't come home that night. I wasn't surprised. When people like her lose control, they scramble. They make calls, set up meetings, try to plug the holes before the ship sinks. But there was no fixing this. By morning, the damage was spreading. I stopped by the coffee shop down the street, grabbed a black coffee, and checked my phone. The podcast episode had over 100,000 downloads. The online forums had picked it up and whispers were turning into full conversations. People who worked at the company were connecting the dots. Hazel and Nolan weren't just an office rumor anymore, they were a scandal. By the time I got to my office, I had a text from an old friend who worked in corporate law. Mike H., your wife's firm is in full panic mode. Nolan's trying to deny everything. HR is having meetings all morning. I smiled. Damage control was useless. I made sure of that. At noon, I parked outside her office. I wasn't there to make a scene, just to watch. Nolan came out first, walking fast, head down, looking like a man trying to outrun bad news. He got into his car without a glance around. Hazel came out an hour later. She was on the phone, her posture stiff, the way someone looks when they're holding it together by a thread. I could imagine the conversation. She was trying to explain, trying to spin it into something salvageable. But the thing about powerful people is they don't like mess. They don't like distractions. And she had become both. I drove home, let it all sit. I had done what I set out to do, exposed the lie, shattered the illusion. But I wasn't done yet. That night, she finally walked in. She tossed her bag onto the counter and turned to me. You don't get to act like the victim. I raised an eyebrow. No? You set me up. You planned this like some goddamn business deal. What kind of man does that? The kind you underestimated. She crossed her arms, but I could see the cracks. You ruined my reputation. You did that. I just made sure people knew. I leaned back in my chair, watching her. How's Nolan doing? Her face twitched, but she covered it fast. You think you look like a man in control? You look like a bitter ex-husband who couldn't handle his wife being more successful. I laughed, slow and easy. That all you got? Silence. I stood, grabbed a beer from the fridge, popped the cap. Look, Hazel, I don't need you to admit what you did. I don't need an apology. I just need you to understand that actions have consequences. You had no problem sneaking around, lying to my face, living in my house like nothing changed. And now you don't get to be the victim. She exhaled, shaking her head. So what now? I took a sip, let the silence stretch. Yeah? Now you pack your things. Her jaw clenched. You're kicking me out? I nodded toward the hallway. Your stuff's already in bags. For the first time, she looked genuinely stunned. She started to say something, stopped, then scoffed. You really think this is going to make you feel better? I shrugged. I feel fine. She stared at me for a long second, then turned on her heel and stormed toward the bedroom. I listened to her moving around, drawers opening, hangers scraping metal. 10 minutes later, she was at the door, suitcase in hand. She hesitated, looking back. You think people are going to see you as some kind of hero? I leaned against the counter. No. Just a man who handled his business. She didn't have a comeback for that. She just shook her head and walked out. The door shut behind her, and just like that, the house felt bigger. Quieter. I exhaled. One problem solved. Now, I just had one more to go. I let a week pass. I wasn't in a rush. Hazel was out of the house, and I'd heard through the grapevine that Nolan Ferguson had taken a leave of absence from work. The company hadn't fired him yet, but the pressure was mounting. People were talking. Executives don't like scandals, and the last thing they wanted was their firm tied to an ethics violation. The podcast had done its job. But there was still one last thing to take care of. I parked outside Harrison and Doyle corporate offices just before noon, the same time I knew their senior executives broke for lunch. I had no intention of going inside. This was a public execution, and I wanted Nolan to feel the eyes on him. I didn't have to wait long. Nolan stepped out, his suit still crisp, but there was something different about him now. He looked smaller, like a man who just realized the foundation under his feet wasn't as solid as he thought. He moved fast, cutting through the parking lot toward his car. That told me all I needed to know. I stepped out of my truck and walked toward him, casual. Hey there, Nolan. He stopped short, glancing around like he wasn't sure if I was going to make a scene. He forced a smile, but his hand twitched at his side. Finley. Didn't expect to see you here. I let that hang for a second, then nodded toward the building. Rough week. His jaw tightened. I don't have time for this. I bet you don't, I said. HR meetings. PR nightmares. Calls from the board. I imagine it's a busy time for you. His lips pressed together. You have any idea what you've done? I smiled. Yeah. He took a step closer, lowering his voice. You think you won? You think you're the first guy to get cheated on? People move on. These things blow over. I chuckled, shaking my head. Oh, Nolan. You really don't get it. I pulled a folded piece of paper from my jacket and handed it to him. He hesitated before taking it, I scanning the first few lines. His face went pale. How the hell did you get this? Private investigator, remember? I nodded at the paper in his hand. It's an internal report. Conflict of interest. Unethical behavior. Possible termination for cause. He swallowed. This isn't public. No, I said. Not yet. He looked up at me then, the confidence draining from his face. What do you want? I let the silence stretch. He already knew. Finally, he exhaled, defeated. I resigned today, and this stays buried? That's right. He looked back toward the building, jaw working. He hated this. He hated losing. But men like Nolan were survivors, and he was already calculating which move would let him walk away with the least amount of damage. Fine, he said. You got what you wanted. I patted his shoulder as I walked past him. No, Nolan. I got what you deserved. By the time I pulled out of the parking lot, I already knew he'd do it. He'd step down, take his severance, disappear from the company. Maybe he'd move, start over somewhere new. Didn't matter to me. He was out, and that was all that mattered. I drove home, parked the truck, and sat for a minute letting it settle. The house was quiet when I stepped inside, but it didn't feel empty. It felt right. I grabbed a beer, leaned against the counter, and exhaled. It was done. Hazel was gone. Nolan was finished. And I was just getting started. A month passed. The dust settled. Hazel moved into a high-rise apartment in Midtown, the kind of place where people paid too much for floor-to-ceiling windows and concierge service. Nolan Ferguson did exactly what I expected, resigned quietly, took his severance, and vanished from the corporate scene. Last I heard, he was looking at opportunities out west, far from the mess he left behind. People like him never really lose, they just relocate. But he'd never be the same. His name was tainted now, whispered in circles that mattered. His power was gone. That was enough for me. I spent the first few weeks cleaning house. Literally. I got rid of the furniture Hazel picked, boxed up the things that reminded me of a life I wasn't living anymore. The silence was good. It gave me space to think, to figure out what came next. I wasn't the kind of man who sat around feeling sorry for himself. One evening, I stopped by Sully's, a hole-in-the-wall bar I hadn't visited in years. Dim lighting, wood-paneled walls, no nonsense. The kind of place where a man could sit with his thoughts and a decent pour of whiskey without hearing a 20-minute speech about the notes in the drink. Anna was behind the bar, same as always. Mid-40s, auburn hair pulled back, sleeves rolled up. She ran the place like she owned it, which technically she did. Well, she said, setting a glass down in front of me. Look what the wind blew in. Been a while, I admitted. She leaned on the counter, eyeing me. Heard about what happened. You all right? I shrugged. Better than her. That got a small smirk. Word is, you handled it. I took a sip, let the burn settle. Just made sure she got what she had coming. Anna nodded like she approved. So what now? You just gonna drink in quiet bars and haunt your office like some old ghost? I smirked. Got a kid I'm looking into. Foster home situation. Something's off. Her brow lifted. Back to the pro bono work? Never left it, I said. Anna shook her head, sliding a napkin across the bar. You need a real case, let me know. Some of the regulars here got problems money can't fix. I glanced at the napkin. A name, a number. I pocketed it without a word. That was Anna, always keeping her ear to the ground. I didn't stay long. Just a drink, a little conversation, then I was back in my truck, heading toward Franklin, an old town south of Nashville, where a kid named Ethan Gregory was waiting for someone to believe him. I'd met him a few weeks ago, a wiry 17-year-old with eyes too old for his face. He told me his foster dad was pocketing the state checks and leaving him to fend for himself. I believed him. I knocked on the door of a sagging, one-story house off a back road. A man answered, 40, thick in the gut, beady eyes that didn't like being challenged. You're Ethan's caseworker? He asked, suspicious. I smiled. Something like that. He hesitated. He ain't here. I tilted my head, looking past him into the darkened house. That's so. Something shifted in his stance. He ran off a couple nights ago. I let the silence stretch, just watching him. People don't like silence. It makes them nervous, makes them fill it with words they didn't plan on saying. Finally, he scoffed. I ain't got time for this. If you find the little bastard, tell him not to bother coming back. I nodded. Yeah, I'll do that. He slammed the door. I walked back to my truck, slid behind the wheel, and pulled out my phone. Ethan hadn't run away. I knew that much. Which meant it was time to start shaking trees until the right one dropped something useful. Because some people needed a reminder that actions have consequences. I spent the next 2 days tracking Ethan. He hadn't shown up at school, no activity on his social media, and the few people who knew him hadn't heard a word. The kid was a ghost. Either he was hiding or something worse had happened. I started at the places I knew he'd been before, the convenience store where he sometimes worked for cash, the church shelter that let him sleep on a cot when things got bad. No one had seen him in over a week. That didn't sit right. Late that night, I parked outside his foster house again, lights off, watching. The man, Dale Jenkins, according to his background check, came and went like he didn't have a care in the world. He'd been collecting money from the state for Ethan for months, and now suddenly the kid was gone. That smelled like a problem. I knocked again, same routine. Dale answered in a stained t-shirt, I squinting like I was the inconvenience. The hell do you want now? I let the silence stretch before speaking. You got 2 choices. 1, you tell me where he is and I walk away. 2, I come back with the cops and we start opening doors. Dale let out a sharp laugh. Cops? Kid's a runaway. You think they care? I held his gaze, let him feel the weight of my patience running out. He shifted, cracking his neck. You some kind of PI or something? I smiled, slow and easy. Something like that. His face twitched. I don't know where the kid is. I sighed, stepped forward into his space. See, Dale, I think you do. And I think you got about 10 seconds before I stopped being polite. His eyes flicked over my shoulder, checking the street. No one around. His breath hitched, just for a second. That was all I needed. I shoved past him, into the house. He barked something. Anger. Surprise. But he didn't try to stop me. The place reeked of stale beer and microwave dinners. I moved fast, down the hall, opening doors. A bathroom, a cluttered spare room, a master bedroom with sheets that looked like they hadn't been washed in months. Then I found it. The door at the end of the hall was locked. I took a step back and kicked it in. Ethan was inside. Thin, bruised, sitting on a bare mattress with his knees pulled up. His head snapped up at the sound, eyes wide. Jesus, he muttered, blinking like he didn't believe what he was seeing. Come on, kid, I said. You're leaving. Dale stormed in behind me, voice rising. You can't just. I turned, fist already clenched, and drove it into his gut. He folded, gasping, hands gripping his stomach. I grabbed his shirt, yanked him close so he could hear me real clear. If you ever touch that kid again, I'll bury you so deep, they won't even find your bones. His head bobbed in a panicked nod. I let him drop. Ethan was already on his feet, grabbing a ratty backpack from the corner. His face was guarded, but I could see the relief under it. He followed me out without a word. We drove in silence for a while, the dark highway stretching ahead. Finally, he exhaled. I didn't think anybody was coming. I kept my eyes on the road. They weren't, so I did. He nodded, looking out the window. You always do this for people? Only the ones who deserve better. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, real quiet, thanks. I just kept driving. I wasn't looking for redemption, but sometimes helping the right person felt damn close to it. Ethan settled into a new foster home a few towns over. A decent one this time. I checked in a few weeks later, sat across from him at a diner over a couple of burgers. He looked better. Still wary, still watching every door like he expected someone to walk in and yank the rug out from under him, but that was normal. Trust takes time. You all right? I asked, dipping a fry into ketchup. He shrugged. Yeah, better than before. That was as close to gratitude as I was gonna get. I didn't need more. I nodded, took a bite, and let the silence stretch. He chewed on his lip for a second, then finally said, You didn't have to help. Nope. So why'd you? I wiped my hands with a napkin, took my time, because someone should have. Ethan didn't say anything, just looked down at his plate and nodded. That was enough. A week later, Dale Jenkins got picked up on a welfare fraud charge. Turns out when you fake expense reports and cash state checks for a kid you locked in a back room, it catches up to you. He'd do a little time. Not as much as he deserved, but enough to make sure he never got another foster check again. Some people call that justice. I call it making sure he never gets a second chance to screw over another kid. I didn't think about him again after that. Some people weren't worth the space in my head. Hazel didn't reach out. I figured she wouldn't. She knew better. She had money enough to rebuild somewhere else, but that wasn't the point. She'd lost what she really cared about. Control. She wasn't the polished executive anymore, the admired leader. She was a cautionary tale whispered behind closed doors. She'd survive. Women like her always do. But she'd never get back what she had. I heard through the grapevine that Nolan took some mid-level consulting gig in Denver. Less power, less prestige. Probably still telling himself he was on top of things. That he'd bounce back. Maybe he would. But every time someone Googled his name, the past would be waiting for him. A stain he'd never scrub out. That was enough for me. One night I found myself back at Sully's. Anna was wiping down the bar when I walked in. She gave me a once-over, then smirked. You look like a man who finished a job. I slid onto a stool. I look like a man who needs a drink. She poured me a whiskey, set it in front of me. So, what's next? I stared at the glass for a second, then took a slow sip. The burn was good. Settling. Not sure. Might take a case or two. Might take a drive. Anna leaned on the counter. You looking for something? I thought about that, rolled the idea around in my head. Then I shook my head. Nah. Just making sure I don't sit still too long. She snorted. Yeah, you never struck me as the type to gather dust. I finished my drink. Let the quiet settle around me. Some men would have been bitter. Some would have let the betrayal eat them alive. Let it turn them into something small and angry. But that wasn't me. I'd walked through the fire, handled my business, and come out clean on the other side. No baggage, no regrets. I left some cash on the bar, gave Anna a nod, and stepped outside. The night was cool, the streets quiet. I stood there for a second, looking up at the dark sky. Then I got in my truck, turned the key, and drove. Some people spend their lives looking back. Me, I preferred the road ahead.